It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to the Phil Ferguson Show. I love this morning voice. What do you guys think? It is maybe a little dry. Did the dehumidifier work too well? But it gives me this kind of extra raspy thing in the morning. Not all the show will have this because my regular listeners may know I record the show when possible over multiple days, sometimes even multiple weeks. So it will only be here for the intro and the ending, which I'm doing on the same day, and then I have to package it all together. But the fun things that we're going to do later today is we're going to talk to Taylor Grin, and he is on a podcast, and we're going to talk all about the podcast during the interview, so no reason to be redundant here. And I think you're going to enjoy their podcast, and maybe you can go check it out. And if you have a few extra bucks, you could always go to their Patreon page and kick in a few dollars. The other fun topic for today is healthcare sharing ministries. That's right, healthcare sharing ministries. And it is yet another brilliant way to rip off believers. So you're going to enjoy that. These people are going and not getting a health insurance. And it's specifically not health insurance because that would require regulation of their industry. But instead, it's a ministry. It's a ministry where you kick in a bunch of money and someday you hope they approve or will help you pay for the medical bills that you've already incurred. It's a beautiful, beautiful scam. I love it. That's right up there near the top. I mean, hedge fund, just being in religion on its own. But this is a nice combination of religion and health care, air quotes, radio air quotes up, health care and scam all wrapped into one. So I have a little segment on that. Of course, if you have other show ideas, things that you'd like to talk about. Recently, I talked about how to invest if you have next to no money. And of course, if you have no money, a lot of these ideas don't work at this time for you. I get that. It's things that you can learn so that when you can start setting aside money, you can do that. The only follow-up idea I have on that concept is maybe you have to kind of lie to yourself, trick yourself. It's something a lot of people have done successfully because if you don't make enough money, it can be really hard, really, really hard. And we have suffered through some rough times, and there's always going to be more rough times. One of the ideals, of course, is to have a skill that's more valuable. So try to do something that not everybody else can do. As an example, virtually everybody can work in the mall as an employee, putting out stock, or at the Walmart. So if you lose that job, you can get another one of those jobs pretty easy right now. But if you can, and I don't know what it is for you, but if you can, find something that you can do that not a lot of people can do. Sometimes that's by studying casually or formally. Sometimes it's by learning a specific skill. As an example, just popped into my head, a welder. If you can learn how to weld, there's only a limited number of people that can do that well, and there's probably jobs waiting for you. So all kinds of things you can do, and it sure does feel like things are a little bit harder for the 20-somethings today than it was 30 years ago when I was 20-something. But even then, best I can remember, 30 years ago, it was fucking rough. I mean, I worked in the mall, talking about not having a specific job skill, but I worked in the mall after I got my MBA. So I got my MBA and places just weren't hiring, and I ended up part-time in a mall store, actually selling music and videos, CDs and cassettes. Remember cassettes? Oh, what a bad idea those were. CDs, cassettes, VHS, even a few laser discs. Only a few years ago did I finally get rid of my collection of laser discs. So try to find something that you can do that not everybody can do. Other fun news here at the Ferguson household, in the middle of a kitchen remodel, and it has been, I don't know what to say, plagued, beleaguered, delayed, more complicated, I don't know, through a variety of unfortunate events. One of them was that the local cabinet company ended up not really caring about COVID, and so several of their workers got COVID, and I think everyone's okay and back to work, but it put the entire business behind by weeks and weeks and weeks. So our cabinets kept getting delayed from their final production date, and unbeknownst to me, I guess I knew this, right? I had to know this, but when remodeling a kitchen, there's a certain sequence that things have to go in, or things have to be done more appropriately. And if one of those things is delayed, everything else might get delayed. So we've had delays. We've had a delay in the cabinets. Our contractor, who I'm not going to name, but does a great job. I don't want to name him because I'm going to mention he got COVID. So I don't know that that's fair for me to say public information. But so he was out. And then one or more of his kids did really well in some sports ball activity and had to go to district and national events. And so he took time off to go do that. And I had no objection whatsoever. Him and his family is more important than our floors being delayed. When we did finally get the cabinets, the cabinet company said it's a good thing you ordered when you did, because the cabinets would now cost at least $5,000 more because of the rising increase of lumber, wood everywhere. So that's kind of nice that we got in before that. I finally got contacted by my solar panel installation company, and hopefully in a week or so, I will get my check from the state of Illinois. Actually, it's going to be from the installation company who received the money from the state of Illinois as rebates provided by Illinois for anyone that put in solar panels and the panels start producing electricity, because this offsets the demand on the grid during peak times, as one could imagine. The other topic that's in my head, and I don't have the answer for this, and maybe I'll do some research to find out, but there's a thing going around with some conservative people I know, Republican Trumpy types, where they're very, very worried about the coming collapse of our grid because of electric vehicles. Apparently they're not worried about the grid because of Russian hackers, or they're not worried about the grid because Texas has its own unique grid and they've gone decades without regulation of any kind. So that's something I may do some research on and get back to you with the details. But I think I've watched some videos, and it'd only be fair for me to mention them during a segment coming up. But I'm under the impression, and if you know different or better, correct me here, but I'm under the impression it takes more electricity to produce gasoline and drive a car forward than the actual electricity would drive the car forward. As an example, oil pumps to pump oil out of the ground run on electricity. Then a part of that oil might be burned in driving a truck to take the oil to a refinery. And when it gets to a refinery, they use a lot of electricity to refine the oil into different components like jet fuel, kerosene, gasoline. And so all of that requires an immense amount of electricity. And then, of course, the gasoline that's created has to be transported in a truck where they probably burn more oil. And then it goes into a gas station. And the gas station gets the gasoline from a tank under the ground into your car with pumps that are powered by electricity. Yeah, you got it. So someone, they had told me, they said, hey, Phil, if there's like a bad storm and the power goes out, how do you charge your car, huh? Thinking that was like a stumper. And I had to ask them, I said, if the power's out everywhere, that means the power's out at the gas station and you can't get gasoline either. They hadn't thought about that second part. I also mentioned to them, of course, that there is the possibility, if it's very sunny, that I could charge my car from my solar panels where you're probably not going to be able to create oil or gasoline on your own property. So I think it's inevitable with electric cars. You've heard me talk about them probably more than you want here, but electric cars are inevitable. They are amazing. And outside of Tesla, the charging infrastructure is not quite there yet, but it's really close. And it is there for the vast majority of people. So take a look into it. Ask me questions, whatever. If you want me to talk more about solar panels, electricity, electric cars, let me know. I can do another segment on it. But I think I've given you some general updates for now. And we're going to take a quick break and get on with the show.
Says slavery has to be considered in context. What's more relative than that? There were people at the time, Thomas Paine, Benjamin Franklin, there were innumerable humanists and secularists who said slavery is evil. The church wouldn't agree. Now, which is it then? Is it that the church is wrong, or, even more suggestive, that God has not yet revealed that it's wrong to them? Or did God support it all those years and then change his mind? From a beginning point of absurdity, you arrive at a terminal point of absolute moral chaos. And I think you've at least done us the favor of making that plain this evening. God, in short, God did not make man in his own image. It is precisely to the contrary. Mammals and primates made many gods and many churches in their own rival images.
This Investing Skeptically segment is on healthcare sharing ministries. That's right, healthcare sharing ministries, also known as HCSMs. Apparently, this is an exploding business opportunity for religion. Absolutely fantastic, and a way for you to avoid paying for insurance. Now, make sure you understand that I did not say an alternate way of getting insurance. It's a way for you to avoid paying for insurance, like throwing coins into a fountain or looking for the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Neither of those activities provide health insurance, and neither does this. If you want more details, because I'm only going to cover this for a few minutes, you can go to John Oliver's show last week, Tonight with John Oliver, and look up Healthcare Sharing Ministries on YouTube, and you can watch a 23-minute video about this, which is quite comical, as is often the case with John Oliver's content. But the basic idea here is a bunch of good-natured, fun-loving Christians get together and throw money in the pot, and when someone has a medical expense, then it gets paid out of that collective pool, and or people write checks to donate to your, your fund, your collection, your money drive. And so one of the strategies, of course, is that when you go to get medical procedures, you make sure that the agencies, the companies, the businesses, whoever's providing medical care for you, make sure they understand that you are not insured, because you're not. Make sure they understand you're not insured. Negotiate the price down. Get it in writing. And then, of course, after the procedure, you want to claim that you're not going to be able to pay it, and you want to negotiate and haggle hard and get that cost down as low as possible. Then you pay your bill. And really, that's the practical end of this service, healthcare sharing ministries, because you just paid your bill. Now, what you're supposed to do next, according to most of them, is then submit a claim and see if they will pay it or help you get it paid in some way. And the funny thing that John Oliver had was multiple people, time and time again, not getting any benefit at all. They featured a story of a young girl who had a brain tumor the size, what did they say, the size of a softball? Something inside of her head, and the medical bills, which surprisingly were low, in my opinion, were $350,000. When they submitted it to their healthcare sharing ministry, they denied it. They also denied someone that had an accident right outside of a bar because they were engaging in the consumption of alcohol, which smoking and alcohol is not allowed or promoted by this ministry. The loophole that helped create this says that the business had to be in existence prior to 1999, which inspired a lot of people to affiliate themselves with pre-existing religions, like a pre-existing condition. Oh, which, by the way, they don't have to cover pre-existing conditions. Matter of fact, they don't really have to do anything because they're not insurance companies. They're not insurance companies. They're not providing you insurance. You are voluntarily choosing to join a healthcare sharing ministry. And what they do and do not pay out is totally up to them. And you basically have no recourse. They have more customer complaints than actual healthcare companies. And that was pointed out in John Oliver's segment, but it is amazing to me that you as a business, as a ministry, with suckers, I mean, investors, clients, patients, members, associates, tied to your religion or some kind of shared belief system, that you're less happy with that than an actual fucking insurance company. That is truly staggering. In the case with the young girl with brain cancer, like I said, it was denied. Well, a local news station got involved. Like Chicago, they have, what is it, Channel 2 on your side or something like that. It's a common feature around the country. Well, a local TV station featured this little girl and her family that was now had no money and had been paying money into or donating, contributing, participating with a healthcare sharing ministry. Other documents have revealed that these ministries apparently pay out about 16% of the money that they have collected to helping people cover medical bills. 16%. Insurance companies, conventional, real, actual insurance companies have to pay out 80% of what they bring in. And I think that's a pretty recent law. They have to pay out 80% of the money they collected. And if they have too much money left over, they actually have to refund members by giving back some of the healthcare premiums that they paid during the year. I'm pretty sure that's part of Obamacare, and you may have noticed you're not getting those checks. I think I got one the first year that was the law, but what the insurance companies found out that, oh my gosh, if we haven't spent 80% of our money, we have to come up with something to spend it on, which might be conjecture. I don't have any actual documents here in front of me. That's why you see so many healthcare and insurance company ads on TV, because they have to spend the money. They have to have it for legitimate marketing purposes, but they can afford, or they just have decided to spend a whole lot of money on insurance to potentially get in new customers instead of reimbursing you, because you might tell friends, hey, I actually got back money from my insurance company, but they're not worried about that. So that's just a little bit on health care sharing ministries. Donate at your own risk, because odds are they're not going to help you. They're going to find a loophole or a reason to not help you, and they're more likely to deny any and all claims than an actual insurance company. So if you want to avoid paying for insurance, simply do not pay for insurance. And you're avoiding it 100%. With healthcare sharing ministries, you can avoid paying for healthcare insurance and give away a whole bunch of your money to an organization that keeps 80% or more of the money you donated to them. The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Your investment should be based on your situation, and you should consult with your financial advisor before taking any action. The show may contain ads. These ads are placed into the show by the hosting company after I finish recording and editing. I have little control over the content of the ads, and you should not assume that I support their products or claims. If you choose to support the show via the new Patreon page, that support does not create an advisor-client relationship.
Those worlds in space are as countless as all the grains of sand on all the beaches of the Earth. Each of those worlds is as real as ours. In every one of them, there's a succession of incidents, events, occurrences, which influence its future. Countless worlds, numberless moments, an immensity of space and time. And our small planet, at this moment, here we face a critical branch point in history. What we do with our world right now will propagate down through the centuries and powerfully affect the destiny of our descendants. It is well within our power to destroy our civilization and perhaps our species as well. If we capitulate to superstition or greed or stupidity, we can plunge our world into a darkness deeper than the time between the collapse of classical civilization and the Italian Renaissance. But we are also capable of using our compassion and our intelligence, our technology and our wealth to make an abundant and meaningful life for every inhabitant of this planet, to enhance enormously our understanding of the universe and to carry us to the stars.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
Okay, everybody, it's that time of the day, the time of the show where we are going to have our fantastic interview. And I have with me Taylor Grin today and one of his claims to fame, and we'll learn more about him during the conversation, of course. But he is on the Godless Rebelution contest. See, I'm not going to edit that either, Taylor, so they'll hear it all. Godless Rebelution podcast. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing good. Doing really good. The 4th of July weekend was a well-needed break. So how are you?
I'm good. Actually, for almost 3 days, I did very little work. One of the problems from working from home, and it's a classic joke that's been around forever, is that as a business owner, I only work half days, and I get to pick which 12 hours. But usually, I mean, sometimes I'm working from 8 in the morning till 10 at night, but I have the luxury of taking breaks. But then I'm always by my office because it's in the house, and I could just hop in here for 5 minutes, and then it's an hour-long phone conversation with a client, which is great. I love doing that part of my job. But over the weekend, I did very little. That was weird for 3 days. That's not normal.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've tried to do a lot recently. I think COVID woke that up in me, is really wanting a work-life balance, and with the jobs I've gone for now, I've said, like, when my business day is over, I am done. Like, I'm turning off the phone. I'm my own person.
Yeah.
And it's been a big change, which I know you can't really do when you run your own business, but
you can. It's just one of those things that if I have something else planned, or a family event, or something I want to focus on, I can always choose to turn off my phone and ignore phone calls. But if my wife and I are watching Big Bang Theory on TV, and one of my clients has a question, I can say, honey, I'll come back in 10 or 15 minutes and answer this question. It's one of those things that a lot of financial advisors can't or don't do because they have an office. And so they go in at 8 or 9 or 10 or whenever they go in, and they leave for golf at 2. And you got to get on the schedule, and their assistant can do that. And I guess my wife's my assistant. She helps a lot, but usually I'm doing the scheduling too. But anyway, Godless Rebelution, and I know you're one of the newer cast members. How'd that happen?
We have we had a co-host, Matt, who he and his wife did not think that they would ever be able to have kids, and then they did. They had twins.
It happens, man.
And so
life will find a way.
Sorry.
Life will find a way.
Yeah, very much. And so he just became very busy, and he started doing the show less and less, and then eventually just kind of stopped. And around when that happened, in January, I was reaching out to Dan for something unrelated. Dan Ellis is the kind of the showrunner. He's one of the other co-hosts, him and Ryan Duffy. I reached out to Dan, and honestly, like, I didn't even realize I was doing it. And then at the end of the conversation, I was like, what if I just, came on? I have XYZ show idea. I have XYZ scripts I want to submit, because I had done some scripts for the show in the past. I did like a 2-episode thing on Steve Bannon and how much of a bastard he is, and other stuff about white supremacist stuff in the U.S. Because that's one of the things I study. Anyway, like the conversation, I didn't intend the phone call to start that way, but the way the phone call ended was with me being a co-host on the show. So that's been since about January now.
Nice. Yeah, it's one of those things that I was joking pre-show. I like saying pre-show. There was nothing saved, just so you know and my listeners know. But pre-show, we were talking about your webpage needs some updating, so I feel so much better about mine now.
Yeah, no, you're right. We have a to-do list on our show notes, and what I've been doing is just copying and pasting our show notes from the previous week, and I'll delete all the stuff that's pertinent for a given week, and we've got just the like skeleton, right?
Yeah.
And our to-do list for that skeleton has been unchanged for about 2 months, and at the top of the list is update the damn website. So I might have to actually do that now. I'm
looking at some of the pictures that come through, and I'm wondering who is the psychotic son of a bitch who is matching dead bunnies in cord colors. I'm sorry, the listeners probably don't know. Dead bunny is lingo in the business for the little foamy ball over the microphone.
That is almost certainly Dan.
Dead bunny, dead cat. Oh my God, now I can't even remember. But yeah, they match. That's pretty sad. Sick. Cool. Great. That's awesome.
Yeah. No, we're all busy. A lot of podcasters, that's their full-time gig. For us, each of us has a job. Yeah. And we make time in between that. You're familiar with that, but then again, you do your show from home. Dan's got a full studio that you set up, and so we can do guests in studio, and yeah.
Well, it might be just enough motivation for me to come to Salt Lake City. He's in Salt Lake City, right?
He is, yeah. Ryan and Dan are in Salt Lake, well, the greater metropolitan area, and then I'm in Kansas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How's summer treating you in Kansas? You guys drought? You getting flooded?
Which typical Kansas, like early summer is hot and wet, and then it just gets drier as the summer goes on until by like September, you've just turned into like a shriveled husk of whatever you used to be.
Yeah.
And then you get about 2 weeks of fall, and it is freezing cold.
Yeah. Yeah. It's we here now in approaching mid-July, I still have a beautiful dark green lawn, which doesn't happen here normally in July because we've had so much fucking rain. Just rain and then rain and then rain. So grass, it's really hard to overwater grass, at least the kind we grow here in the Midwest. And so it's still dark green. I'm waiting for it to dry out because part of the seasonality and reduction of bugs is the extreme drought in the summer and the extreme cold in winter, and you actually get less bugs than you do in some southern states.
Interesting. We I have not noticed that many bugs this year. We had just a big crop of flies all at once for about a week, and then they were gone. And like I've seen some wasp nests in my eaves, but I haven't seen any wasps. I've knocked them down and I didn't get attacked or anything. So.
You got them early. It just made me reminded me of black flies from upstate New York and New Hampshire and Vermont. I don't know if you've ever had that experience.
I have not. New England's about the only part of the U.S. I haven't been to.
Well, they have something that looks like a housefly. I've not studied them, so someone who's going to be an expert is going to say they don't look like houseflies at all, but they look like houseflies. Matter of fact, I think they can be a little smaller than what I normally think of as a housefly, but the fuckers bite. And you know it. And
yeah, you do. Growing up in St. George, we would get horse flies.
well,
which look like house flies, but they're about the size of like your pinky after the last knuckle.
Yeah. I've been bitten by a horsefly, and you can really feel that. But horseflies don't normally mess with humans unless, maybe I'm wrong in your area. But these black flies, they are unforgiving. And if you stop for a moment, you can have 10 or 15 of them biting you at the same time. It was crazy.
Whoa. Hard pass.
Yeah, that was a big surprise for us up in the woods. We were like, yeah, this is over. We're going into the city where it's a little bit better. Yeah. But Godless Rebelution, now that's the podcast. Were you the one? Because I've listened to a few episodes, but I'm not the best at picking out voices, and you guys are all sounding kind of similar. Were you leading the charge on the recent 5-part episode on white supremacy and white nationalism and all that stuff?
Yeah, it's Christian nationalism. White supremacy is kind of incidental to that.
Yeah.
Because in America, Christian nationalism is pretty white supremacist. And there's actually a 6th episode coming shortly. But yeah, I led the charge. Ryan contributed very significantly to a couple of the episodes early on. But it's been kind of my baby. And it has been just a blast. It's been something I've wanted to cover for a long time.
Well, it was very clear that research had been done, and that's one of those things where listeners don't know how much time goes into an advanced prep for some shows. There's some shows that I just fucking wing it, and it's embarrassing. But then there's others I do a lot of work. But I was listening to the most recent episode, and of course, anyone can find it on any good podcast player. Godless Rebelution. You were talking about the numbnuts that took over the bird sanctuary in Idaho. Was it Idaho?
No, the bird sanctuary was in Oregon. The Malheur Refuge. Yeah, and that's Ammon Bundy and his group of chuckle fucks. And I actually grew up. St. George, like I said, is very close to where Ammon Bundy and all of them are. I had a radio show for a little while I was still in college, and my co-host at that time went on to be a journalist, full-time, real world, real life, right? And he actually was one of the guys taking some of the photos when those guys had a standoff with the Bureau of Land Management back in, 2014. So I've always been really close to the Bundys, obviously not in a empathetic way, but physically.
Right.
And so following them as they've done their nationalist, separatist bullshit has been just kind of wild, but something I've kept very personal.
It seems like this guy is a bully gone rogue, because a lot of bullies thankfully outgrow it or learn their lessons sometimes after they get out of high school. But this guy's made it a performance art.
And, well, he never got out of high school.
I mean, they get hugely discounted land to graze cattle, and then they don't even pay for the subsidized feed. And, they just invade places and bring their guns and scare people and threaten people and push them around.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they've watched too many John Wayne movies growing up.
Yeah.
They seem to think that the Wild West is still the Wild West. But I mean, they're dangerous. Luckily they're kind of poorly organized. The good thing about the hyper libertarian types, is that they're like herding cats. Everybody wants to be the leader. Nobody wants to be the follower, and so they tend not to be very good at actually going in a direction as a unit, which is nice. Something like 300 militia type folks showed up at the Malheur Refuge, but only about 15 occupied it. The rest didn't want to get involved with that.
Yeah,
so
it's where that little teeny fragment of common sense kicked in and said, I could join these boys, but I might get fucked up.
And that's one of the things when I was studying extremism. I did my master's thesis on the countering violent extremism program that the DHS honchos.
Yeah.
And one of the things I looked at is, why do people not become terrorists? And a lot of times it's that they find what are called off-ramps. A lot of people don't want to get to violence. They'll rattle their sabers, but they don't want to get all the way there. And then getting a new job or having a kid or getting married or something like that tends to cause them to de-escalate. And that's true of the militia folk too. A lot of them want to feel tough with their store-bought body armor and their 511 clothes and their gun, but when push comes to shove, they leave.
What is 511 clothes?
Oh, 511 is a clothing brand that's favored by military contractors and amosexual cosplayers. So
yeah. I see. I'll make a note to not look for that.
I mean, it's good clothing, but like if you're not deployed to the Middle East, there's no reason for you to have it. So yeah,
I understand. And so you've got part 6 coming up, hopefully in a week or two, right? What's
Yes.
going to be the conclusion of this 6-part segment?
So the episode 6 is a follow-on to episode 5. The reason why it got split in half is just because the content was so long.
Yeah.
We cover Ammon Bundy and what he's doing now, which is trying to set up what he describes as being the Uber for militia movements. What he wants to do, what he's been doing, is creating a digital networking service where militia groups in multiple states can, in a non-hierarchical way, organize themselves into sort of rapid response teams. And so if an event comes up, and Bundy has been historically looking at protests against COVID restrictions, if an event comes up that they want to protest,
right,
they will use that network to find militia groups in the area the protest is going to, and then those militia groups answer the call. And the concern is that they could use what's called siege mentality, or siege style terrorist tactics to create like a rapid response force of those militia, potentially harming like law enforcement or protesters or something like that. And we also talk about Matt Shea, who was a state level legislator in Washington State.
Okay.
And he's the guy, if you heard a few years back, who wrote the biblical basis for war that talked about like killing the men and taking the women and children prisoner and that kind of thing in a sermon.
Wow. Okay.
He's a crazy person.
Yeah,
like
he's
an
cuckoo
actual
for Cocoa
crazy
Puffs.
person.
Yeah.
Yes. And he's a Christian nationalist. He currently proselytizes for a church now, or as a pastor for a church, whatever the appropriate term is, because he lost his position in the legislature. He was castigated by the Republican Party after it came out that he had been aiding and abetting Bundy and his clan when they invaded the Malheur Refuge. He actually showed up there, talked with law enforcement, found out what they were doing to keep an eye on the Bundys while they were in the refuge itself. And then he went to the refuge under the pretext that he was going to try and negotiate them out of there, and instead passed the information that law enforcement had given him to the Bundys so that they could counter those law enforcement methods.
I think that kind of thing out west is worse than horse thievery, right? That there's a punishment to be paid for that kind of behavior.
Typically there is, but in the present political climate, we don't really do anything about that. And I think it's a combination of things like Waco, right? The government really doesn't want to be put in a position where they start another massive shootout or mass casualty event by enforcing against separatists. And I also think it comes from something I wrote about in my thesis. In 2009, I want to say, a guy named Daryl Johnson, who worked for the DHS, wrote a report saying, because we now have a black president, we're going to see an increased amount of domestic violent extremism from anti-government groups and white supremacist groups. And that report got leaked out of the Department of Homeland Security. And the Republican propaganda arm, Fox News, Rush Limbaugh, Bill O'Reilly, those folks lost their goddamn minds, and they howled and raved about it for weeks until Janet Napolitano, ended up basically mothballing his whole office. And since then, up until very recently, up until January 6th, the Department of Homeland Security only had under a dozen people focusing on right-wing domestic violent extremism.
Yeah,
So
it's a staggering thing that I don't know why. Is it just because it's America? Is it because we've always had guns? I mean, we were founded with guns, and but a lot of countries start with a war. That's not too uncommon. But yeah, they just never went away. And then of course, the twisting and turning of the Second Amendment. Your right to bear arms as part of a well-regulated militia.
Mm-hmm.
Well-regulated doesn't mean you and Jim Bob are going out into the back 40 and lighting crosses on fire. That's not a well-regulated militia. It's a mob. It's a gang. It's I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm with you. A big part of it is the fact that Abraham Lincoln got assassinated.
Yeah.
Right. So the Reconstruction did not go the way it probably ought to have. There was a guy, his name is Thaddeus, and I'm brain farting his last name, but his first name was Thaddeus, and he was one of the people that, what's the word I'm looking for here? Spearheaded the idea of like 40 acres and a mule.
Yeah.
Like he was the thought leader on actually providing reparations for Black Americans who had been liberated after the Civil War. And after Lincoln was assassinated, he got pushed to the side. And instead, the Reconstruction became, how can we kowtow to the former Confederates to preserve the Union and not fall into another civil war right away? And I think that did real harm to our country, lasting harm to our country. It's one of the things I talked about, is that a lot of the thought leaders in the post-war period have now become the inspiration for people today. You can draw a direct line from writers in the post-war period to Rushdoony to Barton, right? And that's where Christian nationalism comes from today. So our country has. It's like when you break a bone and you never set it, and so it heals, but it heals crooked, right? And our country healed crooked, and I don't know how we fix that without re-breaking the bone. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think. Getting rid of Fox News would be a nice start.
Absolutely.
There's others. When someone tells me they no longer listen to Fox News because it has become part of the liberal agenda, I'm like, holy fuck.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What is it? OEN and some of these others that are just real. I mean, make Fox News look, like little kids.
Yeah. It's unprecedented. I mean, it really is. I've tried to study a lot of propaganda. It's one of the 3 or 4 fields that really interest me. And Hitler wished he could have had Fox News. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because they just had newspapers then, and you get some crazy guy with a press or a printing press, and he can counter your narrative
and
pretty
radio.
easily. Yeah,
radio is effective too, right? Radio threw a lot of people for a loop, but television, you can cut television to make things look not at all the way they are. Look at the Black Lives Matter protests. All you have to do is cut together a good 2-3 minutes of provocateurs throwing things, right? And you can make it look like the entire protest is violent when it's not.
Yeah,
and that's a lot more believable than radio.
Or you can make January 6th look like just some people out for holiday snaps. They're just on the mall, and they didn't realize they weren't supposed to be in that area, and the doors were open, so they just walked inside. Oh, for fuck's sake. Really? It's truly staggering the dichotomy or the alternate realities that exist within the country, because part of the advantage of the internet is you can find anything you want. The problem with the internet is you can find anything that you want. And so whatever crazy idea you have, whether it's a coup attempt in Washington, D.C., or a flat earth or astrology, you just do a little Google search, and Google will help you find people that are crazy in just the same way that you are. And it gives you the confidence to say, I'm not the crazy one, because I've got 8 people that think just like me, of course, out of 300 million in the United States. Whereas before, when you threw some of these crazy ideas around, the people around you would shun you or say, hey, dude, no, that's crazy.
Yep.
And you learn to keep your head down, and maybe you never fix the crazy, but what are you going to do with it? Nothing. You're just going to try to stay out of trouble. Well, now you can go find trouble. pretty easy.
Yep. And there's been some, but not enough academic literature on that. It's typically described as deliberative enclaves. And the idea, if you take apart the words for that, it's
pretty clear.
People who are talking, who are deliberating, they form enclaves. They form these little tight vacuoles, and they don't leave them, right? And if somebody stops drinking the Kool-Aid, well, the energy, is for them to leave, right? And for the others to become more extreme in light of that. And I don't know the fix. If I knew the fix, I would be getting paid a lot more and doing, evening news circuits on this.
Well, I've seen some studies where they say that more Republican voters like Trump now than they did 4 years ago. And I was like, that a greater percentage, I guess, is what the word I should have used, greater percentage of Republican voters, because a lot of people who aren't crazy have finally given up and left the Republican Party. And now, of course, the question is it enough to secure votes to make sure we don't snap back in 2 to 4 years, the shit that we just came out of?
Right. Well, and presently the two competing forces are demographic shifts are making it harder and harder for Republicans to win victories.
Yes.
But
by normal rules. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah. Gerrymandering and other voting rights restrictions that Republicans in red states are trying to pass are making it increasingly difficult for the islands of blue in red states to be represented.
Yeah. It's yep.
Sorry about that. I just
okay.
had a cat thrown at me, so we're good. Pardon the interruption there.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
It's all good. What else are you working on outside of the working world? I mean, in the secular thought movement, other than the podcast, you got anything else going on?
I don't presently. COVID just put a pause to everything, and I've actually been out of country for the last couple of years. I was one of those private military contractor types out in the Middle East wearing 511 for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And I only got back in the country back in December. So I'm still coming out of hibernation. Now that conventions are happening, I want to start going to those. I'd really like to get my humanist celebrant certification back.
Right.
I had one back in 2015, 2016, and I let it lapse. I'd really like to get that going again and start doing that kind of work.
That's very different from private military work, isn't it?
It is. At a certain point, you've got to turn your sword into a plowshare, so to speak, and that's the stage of life that I feel like I'm in now. I've done. It wouldn't be entirely accurate to say that I've done a lot of work with Mikey Weinstein over at MRFF, the Military Religious Freedom Foundation.
He's been on the show. Matter of fact, it's probably been too long, but maybe I'll call him up again.
Mm-hmm.
But,
he's a great guy.
Yes.
I love him to death. Like I said, it's not right to say that we did a lot of work together. He has represented me, and I have been the guy to bring up cases that he ought to be taking while I was in the military and while I was a contractor working adjacent to military. And so he and I stay in touch a lot, and anytime I can find a way to help him out, I try to. So I've got that going on.
Well,
but otherwise, it's been mostly the show.
I got a funny question for you. I was just told by someone who's former military, and I wasn't in a position to really say that they're wrong, although I said that they were wrong, but I don't have confidence because I was not in the military. But the statement that was made to me is that there is no racism within the military.
Oh, Jesus. No, the military.com, which is the prevailing, I'm using quote fingers, newspaper within the military, did a study, and they found that, I want to say something like 46% of members of the military had directly experienced someone making a racist statement or claim or something similar to that. I personally have seen just ridiculous racism, and a lot of where it happens is military folks, especially on deployments, will form what they call no butt hurt type pages. Right?
Okay.
And the idea for these pages is to function as sort of like a 4chan kind of situation where anyone can go into those pages and tell whatever jokes or post whatever memes that they want, and the idea is that nobody will get butthurt about it, right? As that's why they're called what they're called. But almost always those end up being very racist, bigoted type posts. And if somebody tries to call them out on that, they just get kicked out of the room.
Yeah, because that's the selection bias, where you get to control and select and spread your propaganda without, under the guise of free speech. What was that bullshit that I think it's still out there, where all the conservatives were going to run to get out of Facebook? Parler?
Parler was one. Gab is another one. But yeah, Parler, I think, was the one. It was a flash in the pan, is what it was. Its servers got shut down, and then its counter, what's the word I'm looking for here? Its counter DDoS protection service dropped them as well. And at that point, they're currently being hosted by a Russian security service.
I was almost going to say, is it hosted now in Russia? But that's too far. It's how many connections can there be to Russia and Trump and these extremists before people think or realize that even if they're not knowingly colluding by the legal definition, they see the advantage in helping each other, and that should be enough to make me not want to be involved with these people.
Yep. Well, and that's my next big research project, actually, is one of the things I've observed, because there's I'm looking at my bookshelf right now, and I see things like, The Founding Myth by Andrew Seidel, Power Worshippers, White Too Long. There's a ton of books that have been written on Christian nationalism, right? But there is a connection between Christian nationalist groups like the Family, like the Congressional Prayer Caucus,
right,
and a few other organizations, and basically Russian parallel organizations that do the same kind of thing, but in Russia. And those two groups meet at conferences, and most of those conferences are oriented around driving up voting by using the culture war of anti-LGBTQ rights. And they also push for legislation in other countries that do things like penalize being gay with prison sentences or torture or executions in primarily African countries.
Right.
But there are American lobbying groups who are responsible for pushing that legislation on African countries, for example.
Yeah, Go ahead.
There's a Russian connection there, and I have been working on research, and I'm nowhere even close. I'm not close enough to doing it on my own show, let alone here, right? But there is a gap in the research, as far as I can tell, in trying to figure out where those tendrils go. To what degree are the Christian nationalists who are doing this in America self-starting, or are they being useful idiots for Russian potentially operatives, right?
Yeah.
And that's something I'm digging into, but I'm not close to publishing on that yet.
Yeah, well, let me know when you've got something solid to talk about, and we can have you back on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Please, thank you.
If someone wants to talk to you or learn more about you or email you or whatever, how do they do that?
So if you want to email me, or if you want to reach out to me personally, reach out to me on Twitter at Taylor M. Grin. Actually, let me make sure that is still my handle. I'm a terrible guest right now.
Oh,
if you want to reach out to the show, go to godlessrebelution.com or email us at godlessrebelution@gmail.com. But I've changed my Twitter handle recently, so I need to actually. Yeah, it's Taylor M as in Michael Grin is my Twitter handle, and I respond to that.
Very
I really
nice.
Want to give up my email, but yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, if there's anything you want me to put in the show notes, if you get it to me in the next day or so, I'll try to add that in so it's clear to anybody. But otherwise, thank you so much for coming and spending your valuable time to talk to us about some of these really horrific things, and maybe an educated listener is a better listener because now they know what to look for.
Yeah, I really hope so. If you want to get more educated, I really obviously I wrote the script, but I really want you to go out and listen to our mini series on Christian nationalism. I'm pretty proud of it, and I think that you'll come away from it realizing that things are a lot worse than they seem, and hopefully be motivated to show up to vote and get your friends to show up to vote so that we can counter these Christian nationalist forces who really do want to turn America into something like Gilead. So thank you for giving me a place to share more about that.
All right, everybody, that was Taylor Grin. Thank you so much for being on the show again.
Thank you.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
To be honest, I'm delighted that you're still here. Thank you for listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. Hopefully you enjoyed everything up to now, at least. Maybe even this part as well. One of the fun things that I've been, screwing around with in the last few days, last few months maybe, Facebook launched the ability for your podcast to play on the Facebook platform because they want you to do everything while you're in Facebook. I get it. We can talk about monopolies and large companies taking over everything in another segment. But, I got notified that, hey, we can share your content here on Facebook as well. What do you think of that? And I ignored it for a while, and then I figured, okay, it should be pretty easy. So I signed up. It's a few clicks, a few keystrokes, no big deal. If no one ever watches one on Facebook, I'm not hurt. If someone watches it on Facebook, all the better. And shortly after I signed up, I got a mysterious email, I think from Facebook. And there's no way for me to check, at least like call up 1-800-Facebook and say, hey, did you send me this email? But I think it was legitimate, where they explained that within one of my shows, there was a 2-minute and 48-second piece of music that is copyright protected by Warner Brothers. And of course, there was a link to listen to it. Clicked on the link, and it's 2 minutes and 48 seconds of silence. So I don't know if their system doesn't work yet to actually pull out what was claimed to be a copyright violation. The 2 minutes and 48 seconds of silence was really well done, I think. So that was nice. And then they give you the chance to appeal the claim that Warner Brothers must make. And I'm assuming that Facebook is taking on the obligation of running the software, the simulation, the program to find pieces that match probably files that they've been given by copyright holders. So you could protest, and so I protested and said, I don't think Warner Brothers has the copyright to 2 minutes and 48 seconds of silence. Now, I'm sure it's not actually silence, but I don't know what it is. And I don't know if it's a new show. I don't know if it's the show from last week or a show from 6 years ago, because that information was not provided to me. But what was really odd, and this is one of the problems where someone else said it before me, is that eventually monopolies are going to monopolize and you don't have any input. They can seem amazing and wonderful the whole time that they're building, and that's part of why they succeed, because they're doing things well. But at some point when they win the game, then they don't care anymore. Or there's a chance that they don't care anymore. It's really likely. So the funny thing is that it said, if you want to protest this or, claim that you're not in violation, it had a warning that if you protested this violation, and by re-examining your file, if Facebook finds more stuff, you could actually get a bigger penalty or have more content removed. And that's not how justice should work. I mean, if I've used someone's content that is copyright protected and they want to have me remove it from my show, awesome. But for Facebook to tell me that if you want to object to our claim that this is not yours, then you have to protest and be aware that you could have a bigger penalty. I don't. I mean, it's like taking someone to court and saying, if you protest this ticket, this arrest, whatever, we're going to go through your entire background and history and look for more stuff. Or you could just take it. You could just take our judgment and move on, which I don't like, that idea. I protested anyway, and I just got notified yesterday, I guess, that how did they phrase it? Warner Brothers has, I don't know if they dropped the claim, if they cleared the claim, but basically what Facebook apparently thought was copyrighted Warner Brothers material. Warner Brothers either didn't follow the procedures and respond to confirm or deny, or they said, that's not us. You made a mistake, Facebook, and matched up to something that's not ours. So I'm free and clear. So I don't have any problem with Warner Brothers. I love you, Warner Brothers. So that's good. A few minutes later, after getting this notification, I am now told that something like 1 minute and 37 seconds of a show is claimed or copyrighted by Sony Music. And maybe it is. But again, there's no link for me to hear it. There's no way for me to know exactly which show it is in or what they're complaining about. So that struggle continues. And this, of course, is also, my podcast can be on Facebook, which it wasn't before. So I guess any new platform or way for people to find the show is nice. So if you would like to help out or kick in for the cause, at patreon.com/Phil, you can sign up for as little as $1 per episode. It's not per week. It's also not per month, but it's not per week. So if I am a little late putting out the next episode, you're not out a dime. You're not out a dollar either, but you're not out any money. So you can do that. $1 is the minimum I've set up, but the top tier is $6.66. So thank you, extra special thank you to the people that have just recently signed up to contribute $6.66 every time I make a show. It's not a huge amount of money, but it is kind of a nice and warm and fuzzy feeling that people are willing to contribute to say, yeah, Phil, I like what you're doing. I think it has value to me, whether it's the absolutely wonderful people that I interview who agree to come on the show, or the segments I do about investing or investment scams, or things like the healthcare sharing Ministries earlier in this show. So thank you for everyone who has joined up at patreon.com/Phil. If you don't have any spare money, that's cool. Don't worry about it. You can also help me by going to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher and leaving a 5-star review for the show. So that's some of the things that you can do to help out. Also, if you are in the secular, skeptic, atheist, humanist movement and have a blog, YouTube channel, podcast, whatever, and you'd like to come on the show, you can email me, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. If you've read a good book, I'm always looking for book recommendations. I might read it, and I might contact the person who wrote it for an interview. If it's someone really famous, it's really cool if you can connect us, or at least give me their contact information if you have the permission to do so. I don't want to just go bug random people. But anyway, thank you for listening. And hopefully, I think the FFRF convention is officially on. I'm going to have to double check that in Boston. Yeah, the heartbreaker for me is it's on the same weekend as the YouTube convention in Texas for secular YouTubers. I'll give you more information about that as it becomes available in a few months. And hopefully I get to see you somewhere in person. Until then, ciao.